Scholars from across the world gathered on the grounds of Sa Temple in Pololo Valley, Oahu, to imagine a global, non-killing society. University of Hawaii political scientist Dr. Glenn D. Paige, author of A Global Non-Killing Political Science, gathered guests from over 40 countries for consultation of this great idea.
I was just saying, Petra Kelly is not like any other political and nonviolent leader I think we've heard about at the event. And that is why I very much wanted to bring some material manifestations of the things that Petra Kelly held so dear to her. Tibetan flag that was given to me by the German Green Party. And this from the Dalai Lama. And I've brought some documents from the Greens and some of Petra's books. And I hope you will take a second to stop by and look at these. They are seminal documents of an extraordinary life. And I am so happy that Glenn invited me to speak about Petra Kelly to you. Unfortunately, my dear colleague from Berlin, Eva Quistorp, who lived this history every moment as one of the founders of the most possibly dysfunctional, but one of the most brilliant and radical transformational oppositional political parties and movements in the West. So I'm very, very sorry that Eva Quistorp couldn't come today, but I do have some comments from that I hope I can incorporate. I think Petra's spirit, Petra Kelly's spirit, is very much present in our gathering today because one of Petra's biographers said Petra Kelly liked to see dead air move. Glenn Page, our dear colleague, likes to see dead air move. And voila, Glenn Page brought Petra Kelly and her entourage to Hawaii. Was it 22 years ago, Glenn? Somewhere around 20 years. We were sitting on satin cushions in this very room. Petra was a very complex personality, a brilliant. It is impossible to emphasize the brilliance and the articulate nature of this strong-willed, independent, feminist woman. I think she found a great deal of peace in this visit here and a great deal of solace, which she was not able, unfortunately, to feel among her colleagues too often in the Green Movement. And that's one of the lessons that I wanted us to reflect on. Also, she would be 60 years old at the end of November, and I'm happy to say the Heinrich Boll Foundation in Berlin, where her archives are housed, are having a big conference. I hope that I will be there in just a few weeks. To think of Petra Kelly as being 60 years old just doesn't happen because she just embodied energy and youth and dynamism and drive. I have never known a human being in the world, except perhaps Eva Quistorp, with more drive, and she indeed made dead air move. She was very, very a close confidant of the Dalai Lama. She made that one of her most important missions was to try to popularize and publicize to sort of an uncaring world at that time the issues in Tibet, and for that she showed incredible leadership. Petra was inspired by Gandhi. She was inspired by Dr. Martin Luther King. She was also inspired by Rosa Luxemburg, who was a very, very brilliant and fiery leader of the German Marxist radical tradition and the Social Democrats. And on her door, in Petra Kelly's office in the Bundestag in Bonn, Germany, were two huge posters, one of Rosa Luxemburg and one of Martin Luther King. So those were her icons as well. And she reached out to those spirits and that intelligence that had come before her. Petra was indeed a larger-than-life figure. She was the most exciting, charismatic, and transformative political figure of my decade. That does not mean she was a saint. In fact, she was far from it. She was a very complex, contradictory human being, which is why we can learn so much from her experience and why she is so fascinating. Saints are not too interesting. Petra Kelly was born in Germany in 1947. Her father had left the family, her German father, and her mother married an American GI, John Kelly. And when Petra was 11, they moved to the United States, to Virginia. She went to high school there. She went on to American University to do her college degree in Washington, D.C., and she was very much involved with Robert Kennedy's campaign for president. She learned a great deal about the civil rights movement, and she was really inspired. She was a sponge, soaking up, always questioning. She was, after all, from the German intellectual tradition, right? So she's a fierce debater, she's questioning. She learned a great deal. After graduating from American University, Petra went to Amsterdam and she received her master's degree. She worked for the EU in Brussels for a time. And then in the late 70s, she returned to Germany at this really incredibly epical historical moment to participate in the broad citizens' movements, which brought to light so many of the current political issues and priorities that we are now beginning to realize and act on. They were brilliant at symbolic politics. They were brilliant at sloganeering, the Greens. Think globally, act locally. This is now sort of one of our talismans, as it were. But she and Eva Christor both were participating in that historical moment. Let me read you what Eva says about that. Petra Kelly and the European Greens got their moment in history in cooperation with the dissident groups in East Germany, Eastern Europe. They discovered and grasped the moment and started to build new alternative institutions. They created a broad critical public and electorate. They created new forms of direct democratic participation, alternative media, and peace and ecological research institutions. These were really, indeed, revolutionary and courageous accomplishments of the Greens. Eva says, "It was our chance and we used it with fresh enthusiasm for a lively democracy and more participation of citizens in global issues to defend our common interest." The Greens were elected to the Bundestag, the German parliament, in 1982, and it was an absolutely incredible event. Let me just read you one sentence, or I think I have. Here's what Petra said about that moment, and I have a photograph. They are walking down, I don't think it's Unten den Linden, but it's a street near the Bundestag. You have Petra in some tight-looking blue jeans and boots. She is carrying flowers. Her colleagues with her are carrying tree seedlings. So from the very first moment, these decadent old white indifferent men in the Bundestag knew that something was about to transform their bodies, the electoral body. So this is what Petra said about that moment that was so amazing. I hope this will stay here so you can see it. She said, when we entered the Bundestag, we offered a splash of irreverence to those somber chambers. And they certainly did. This is one of the iconic images that the Greens use to publicize their politics. Petra's ideas and those of her daring colleagues in De Clunen, the Greens, sparked a burning crusade to change politics as usual. They were indeed radical Democrats. They were extremely disappointed with and rejected the top-down spoils systems of electoral politics. They wanted to change politics as usual. They wanted to link leadership to the grassroots from which they were deeply connected, because in fact they had come from the peace movement and the citizens movements and the feminist groups and the anti-nuclear movements. They were based in the grassroots, making this very potentially problematic transformation into the tightly structured electoral world of the parliament in Germany. They brilliantly sold, as it were, their radical ideas on environmental crises, deployment of the U.S. cruise missiles, which were sitting right there in their backyard on German soil then, in the 80s, to the population. They wanted to help build a more authentic politics of the people and to transform the way business was done. The Green Party was based initially on 4 pillars, as they call their principles: ecology, social responsibility, grassroots democracy, and nonviolence. Petra was also a strong feminist, as were her colleagues, and this was another innovation that the Greens brought forth. So this was quite a moment when they were elected to the Bundestag. And one of the ways they illustrated this graphically was by a lot of, as Petra said, a lot of irreverence to the chamber. So here we have the feminist, young, modern woman with the dove of peace riding and taming this bull of Europa. Sunflower was the symbol of the green movement. So here you have these white men who had been in the Bundestag. They're drinking, they're reading pornography, they're smoking, they're completely indifferent to the will of the people, and you have this transformation taking place. It was very, very heady and very, very exciting, and possibly too much to sustain itself. The new paradigm of politics that the Greens wanted to enact, as I showed one of the slogans, think globally, act locally. Greens are neither left nor right, but in front. This was their explicit rejection of a tightly ideological political framework. Now, let me emphasize again that they come out of the left German intellectual tradition where social democracy and Marxism has a very long and justifiably proud history. So this green movement tried to embrace both of these extremes. You had red greens, the Marxist social democrats, and you had the green greens, the fundamentalists and the realists, they were called. And the green greens were the feminist, the environmentalist, and often they were conflicting in their strategies and their goals, but they were trying to encompass both sides of this movement, the red greens and the green greens, within an overarching movement. And it was hoped and diligently worked that nonviolence and mutual respect would allow them to cooperate and to synthesize some of their differences. Greens are the anti-party party. That was one of Petra and Eva Quistorp's principles. They are the anti-party party. They do not want politics as usual. They don't want this existing paradigm. When we sort of talk about lessons or achievements, it's an extremely complex history. It was radical. It was transforming. The existential implications, I think, of trying to coexist in this very dynamic and very, I did use the word dysfunctional at one time, but a lot of condemnatory language and behavior transpired. Petra Kelly, having been educated in the United States, articulate, beautiful, confident, she became the natural global spokesperson for the Green Party. This caused a lot of rancor, a lot of jealousness. The jealousy, there was a lot of infighting in the Greens, actually savage interpersonal dynamics. If you'll read Petra's books, Fighting for Hope, Petra Kelly, Thinking Green, this is one of the aspects of the Green Party that really wounded her. And I just want to read what she says about that here. 8 years of self-destructive and fruitless infighting among our various factions had paralyzed our political activities and created an atmosphere steeped in jealousy and distrust. And this was too much even for the greenest voter. In the course of 8 years in Parliament, our internal feuds grew worse and worse. We became intolerant, know-it-all, and smug about passing the 5% hurdle, which was the minimum vote that it took to get their faction into Parliament. In weekly intervals, we fought our battles in the most aggressive and inhumane ways, often denouncing each other, quarreling, and pointing fingers at whatever faction was unwelcome at that particular moment. We could not succeed if the ways we treated each other made more headlines than the substance and aims of our policies. They were doing all of this in the critical scrutiny of the media, which tried to ridicule them, which brought all of their squabbles and feuds. Debates are a logical part of political negotiation, but they were very much ridiculed in the public, and the Greens were thrown out in 1990. They lost all the seats in the Bundestag. Petra became very isolated. I didn't tell you the end of Petra's story because it's a very tragic story. She became very isolated. She no longer had the platform of the Greens and her global influence. Her partner, Gert Bastian, who had been a NATO general, murdered Petra in 1992, and then he killed himself. So the strongest advocate for nonviolence and peace was murdered in her own home in Bonn. But her life, it's impossible for us to create another Petra Kelly, and she certainly would disavow any cult of personality. But I think her energy and her intelligence and her spirit, and just too quickly, I know I'm going over, 2 lessons. The transformation from a grassroots social movement into the structural confines of an elective system is extremely difficult. They're trying to remain responsive to the grassroots. At the same time, they're being caught up by the institutional and structural mandates of the Parliament. So this was a very stressful and very difficult transition. Number 2, lack of peace among themselves. And you all have spoken eloquently about Dr. King and Gandhi and Sarvodaya movement. We have to have peace in ourselves. We are the way. There's no way to peace or peace. This is something that the Greens could not do. They weren't able to do it, and the savagery they exhibited to one another. Petra suffered from panic attacks. She would address a rally of 25,000 people. She would go home to her apartment in Bonn, and she could barely open a can of soup for herself. So this personal and political dichotomy between the private life and the public life was very savage and had savage implications for Petra. So the second lesson I would say is that we must learn to be critical, to be analytical, but to be peaceful somehow among ourselves, and to find ways of resolving conflict that are not soul-destroying. And if I could just end with one quick comment from Petra, this would be her methodology, I think, for us. Nonviolence also means that men and women are reconciled to themselves, with their own species, with nature, and the cosmos. In a deeper sense, disarmament means exposing one's own vulnerability. Martin Luther King's appeal to boycott the buses seemed ridiculous to begin with. Planting saplings in Germany also seems ridiculous. Our efforts seem ridiculous until they are normalized into the world and society. We are not armed and we make an easy target, but we will not cut ourselves off from life. We have gentleness, force of numbers, freedom from domination on our side, and the solidarity to overcome all divisions. Our motto is, be gentle and subversive. So I think that's the message we can take from Petra Kelly, to be gentle and subversive. And I thank Glenn Paige for making Dead Air move, for being Petra Kelly's mentor, for assisting her publications, and being the loving friend that he was, and most importantly, for bringing Petra Kelly to me and introducing us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nancie Caraway, for your nice presentation. And I think next speaker will be Dr. Glenn Paige. So I would like to introduce Dr. Glenn Paige.
The paper is Ron Mallone and the Fellowship Party. The basic idea is a political leader in a system that allows democratic political competition for votes. In this case, England and the United Kingdom. And it follows on from Nancie's excellent report on Petra Kelly, the problem of how to form a political party and make it work in a democratic system. So Petra's a pioneer, and I think Nancie laid out that. She laid out major points just perfectly about that problem. Anyway, this fellowship party is really interesting, and it's unknown throughout the world. It was formed in 1955, coalition of World War II veterans, fighter pilots, and some pacifists, and the main problem was nuclear missiles being implanted in Europe, anti-nuclear, anti-war, and they decided to form a political party. And at that time, they had enormous support from cultural figures, very famous writers, composers, just 50 or 60 of the most brilliant people in England, that cultural area. The party is now, 52 years old, Democratic Political Party, not a movement. I think the first lesson, Ron is now 90 years old, and he lives in London with his companion and wife, Ursula. So the first lesson I learned from him is the powerful inspiration of non-killing faith. He became a pacifist at age 15 in 1931. Just he read the Sermon on the Mount, became a pacifist by reading that. And against war, Sermon on the Mount is Matthew 5, 6, and 7. It's just amazing. So this conversion to non-killing, to the message of Jesus, has been with him from age 15 to age 90. It's just as strong now as it was then. And this is the key to his whole life as a leader, was this commitment to the non-killing. In this case, Christianity. He's a lay teacher, a preacher, and goes around. He tries to infuse his party with that faith. He's actually a Christian socialist. The socialism of Jesus, not the socialism of the Marxist socialist. A Christian pacifist socialist, basically. So that faith, number one. The lesson two would be how he and a few companions, how you go for 52 years trying to get a few votes, get into Parliament. They said, why should we let the people in Parliament make all the decisions about war and education and other needs of health care and transportation and happiness, and so why let those people make decisions? Why don't we enter the Parliament? So do that for 52 years and essentially fail in having almost nobody elected to the Parliament. At first they had a couple of people elected, and then later the London City Council or somebody there. And it keeps having. They have a party meeting every year and a conference every year in a church near King's Cross. And they get older and older. The older pensioners are dying off, and it shrinks down. I attended their party meeting a couple of years ago, and to see it. But next lesson is persistence. Might take 50 years or 100 years or something, but Ron Mallone just demonstrates that. Demonstrates faith, commitment to the principle, and this effort. And next is the importance of communication skills. I think this shows across many of our leaders. Notice many of them create journals or magazines or newsletters or something. So he created a it's a self-made 1820 page, hand cranked. He types it out. Ursula cranks 70,000 times a month on an old cyclist style machine. They don't have a computer. They don't have a copy machine. And for over 45 years, every month, he's published day by day. And he edits it, and it has a review of the British press. And he criticized the stories of the day. It comes out every month from a Christian socialist pacifist position. And he quotes the press, all the atrocities, all the terrible things that are happening. Then he keeps insisting on the principles of the Fellowship Party. I should remind you what those principles are. Through direct constituency action to work for a government which will act on the principles of nonviolence and social justice. Second, to place loyalty to moral standard above sectional and personal interests and try to spread these standards everywhere. 3, to abolish war by renouncing armed force as an instrument of national policy, by refusing to make, possess, or use weapons, all weapons of war, refusing to let British territory be used by the armed forces of any country, opposing military conscription, refusing to take human life in war and other armed conflicts, and educating our children for peace and against war. Try to persuade all religious organizations and governments to renounce war, to reunite people of all nations, irrespective of race, color, or creed, in a nonviolent movement to end war and tyranny and establish equal rights and opportunities for all beings, to replace power politics by a system of international cooperation based on negotiation, arbitration, and conciliation. Now those are the principles he uses as an editor. He's very good. He studied French, by the way. Nancie's good in French, and he's a good scholar. He's a smart boy. He taught school. He was kicked out of his teaching jobs during World War II because he's a conscientious objector and religious grounds and so forth. But those are the values. So every month for 45 years, those kind of values are put to the critique of the British press. He takes, 4, 5, 6 newspapers, quotes the stories. Also, it has an arts section, but the arts is part of it. And he's a great theater fan. He goes to London West End. He's seen every play there is. He goes to sexy plays, violent plays, or whatever it is, and he writes it up. He writes beautiful theater reviews, and he has film reviews, and he's a cricket fan. So he has a section in this handout about all the cricket scores. I mean, he's a cricket nut, and he knows everything about cricket, so it's got the cricket in there. And then he invites poets to submit things to publish. Any poet wants, he publishes these poets, peace poets, and in this. And then he has a whole section on review of the arts written by other people, especially painting and exhibits in London, and especially books from the Yale Press on the arts, architecture, history of things. It's a mix of politics, culture, arts, sports, and at the end he makes a little plea to pay up your dues. I forget, it's £29 now. Subscribe. But anyway, a leadership lesson is the importance of some kind of communication, and however you do this. And the other one, all right? The fourth lesson that I get from him is the importance of a companion co-worker. I mean, Ursula, his wife, is a saint, and she just works with him, and they go door to door, 30,000 houses, 20,000, up and down the street, leafletting, door to door, supermarkets, campaign after campaign. I don't know how many campaigns they've been involved in, but a team. It's a co-gender team. It's not just a one-person team. Lesson 5, I only made 5. The importance of a successor or successors. Ron Mallone has no successor. He's 90 years old. There's no clear successor. There are only about 15 people who show up at the National Party convention and meeting. So an example of that. And all his papers are piled up in his house, Blackheath, all over the place, all these 45 years, everything is there. No archive, no staff, no secretary, nothing, just Ron and Ursula creating a party. Beginning, there's still people there helping him. No funds, nothing. But he created a non-violent political party. It's real. Not an imagination. It did exist. It still exists. A party of one or a party of two, and his goals are Christian, socialist, pacifism. His critics would be this, even within the party: you're too extreme, your principles are too extreme, your Christianity is too extreme. No killing, no war, no, you should soften all this, and maybe you'll get more peace. It'll just be peace or something. He didn't, he doesn't. All right, there's another paper in here that I'm not speaking about. There's another party, the Sabodaya Party of India. I call your attention to read that paper when you have a chance. Professor Unithan, the same thing happening in India, almost like the Greens, breaking out of the Gandhian movement, constructive movement of Gandhians who don't want to have anything to do with politics, and moving over, try to have a Gandhian, Sabodaya-based political party that would actually try to enter elected politics. So we have the Greens, the Fellowship Party, the Sabodaya Party of India. Somebody asks you, have there been any non-violent political parties? You say yes. Is it possible to have a nonviolent political party? Yes. And just like other parties, they fail, they start, they have some successes or not. But these are seeds of a just ordinary, competitive, democratic political party based on nonviolent principles. So I'll end with that.
So before going for the photo, I'd like to invite Professor Johan Galtung for some comments and some ideas.
Just like to express my deep gratitude to Glenn for our very, very many years of friendship, of having worked together for a world where nonviolence, inspired by Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and all the others that I venerated in this wonderful conference, could be a principle. We have some distance to go, particularly when located in this country, which is the country in the world today furthest away from any slightest idea of resolving conflict, which has only one idea: to win, and can only accept one thing on the other side: unconditional surrender. So I want to congratulate Glenn having the conference in this country and having it in a place with a very high density of the military capacity, used against all rationality, all compassion, to try to dominate and establish a hegemony. Now this is hubris, if anybody ever had it. And in the Greek thinking, the hubris meets with nemesis. And the nemesis is now catching up with US empire very quickly. So, since I'd like to say a little bit more about how we meet that situation tomorrow, I find the conference extremely timely. I find the space excellent. I find the blessing of 1,000 Buddhas in front of us extremely inspiring. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. Okay, now
Start. But let me first start by greeting you with a welcome and a good morning to all. This is our final day. It has been this is the fourth day. And I just want to say that you recall that when we first came, we had these misty rains that came over. That was a blessing for all of you. God's greeting you and blessing you. But today, the final day, notice the torrential rains that came. There's a certain sadness that comes in knowing that there's closure and then you will be party, just so that you won't be alarmed by our tsunami. Heavy rains. Okay, so this is a kind of a sadness cry of the gods. Now with that, we'd like to begin this morning by calling upon Chaiwat for a short meditation.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Wal asr innal insana lafi khusrin illal ladzina amanu wa amilus solihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. All problems and obstacles will be overcome by truth and perseverance, patience, inshallah.
Thank you, Chaiwat. This morning, our rapporteur is Luis Otero from Colombia. As you know, everybody, today is the 4th of November. But across the land, okay, Sri Lanka, it's the 5th of November. And today is a very, very special day. And therefore, we ask all of you to stand, not you sit, to sing Happy Birthday to our, this is his special birthday.
To whom?
Okay.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, everyone. Happy birthday to you.
We turned 26 today.
Ari, it's an honor to celebrate your birthday with you. Thank you. Today we're going to start with the Global Non-Killing Academy, and unfortunately, because Dr. Majali could not be with us, he did send this paper to us, and Professor Faisal will be summarizing and giving us the essence of that presentation.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. First of all, as the chairman said, it's a sad day because we are going to part this world. But I hope in Arabia there is rain as this rain, so we'll be very much happy than the petrol. Second thing, I'm really so happy to be here with you, and thanks to my brother, Professor Paige, to give me this opportunity with you, and I hope we will continue to spread the idea of non-killing, brotherhood, humanity. And regarding His Excellency Dr. Al-Majali paper, I'm not going to speak about exactly his paper because it's with you, and it is written in very sincere way, as Dr. Majali always like that. And before I came, he sent his deep regards and greeting to Professor Paige, and he told me how's the first time he met him, and he took him to Karak, the town of Majali, to the south, and he offered to him the mansaf, this Arabian dish. Dr. Majali, first of all, I will give you a little bit brief about his background. He is a doctor of medicine. He finished his studying, I think, 1953, and then he joined the army until he reached general. Then he joined the politics, and he shifted from ministry to other. But the best days, as he used to tell us, when he was the chancellor or the president of the University of Jordan. Then, when His Majesty King Hussein, late King Hussein, searched for a man to lead the negotiation, peaceful negotiation with Israel, not anyone who just lead it without believing it. He chose Salam al-Majali to lead the Jordanian and the Palestinian, because at that time both delegation, Jordanian and Palestinians, under the umbrella of the Jordanian umbrella. So Dr. Majali, he led the delegation, peaceful delegation between the Jordanian, Palestinian and Israelis. Dr. Abdel Majali, I think and I believe, he was not the establisher, but the creation of the University of Jordan. It is as they said, it is the best university in the Middle East. And the global vision, the peaceful trends of Dr. Majali led him to be a part of the United Nations University, which, as you know, established in Tokyo. And during his presidency in the University of Jordan, they opened a branch to it in Jordan, and still this branch is going on and very active. And also, I think next year they will inaugurate the new building, which I hope Dr. Glenn, he will be there. In the same time, as he believed this world is a global village after the communication and the interaction between the interests of people, between the faith of people, as he always used to say, he started the United Nations International Leadership Academy. And he, from the basis who built this academy, and I think they make their first conference. When I have the chance and honor to meet our brother, Professor Glenn D. Paige, in 1997. And after that, every year, there is a conference, there is a meeting, there is a forum for this academy. But in the last 2 years, because of the shortage of budget, I think they postponed this forum. Dr. Majali pointed out in his paper that this global should live in peace, tolerance. We have to accept each other. As he said, he is Muslim because his father Muslim. He never chose his religion. None of us choose his religion or his name or his race. It is just like that. So we have to live in this world as brothers, not as enemies. We have to share the benefit of this world, not just for us, for coming relations. And I remember always he said in Peaceful, when they asked him how you led the peaceful the delegation, Jordan delegation with Israelis, and you are a military man and you lost a lot of from your family on the wars between Arabs and Israelis. You know what he said? He said, in peace, everybody winner. Maybe Israel win 95% and Jordan win 5%. But both of us winner. While in war, nobody win. Israel defeated the Arabs 3 times and still they are afraid from future. Still there is a lack of stability, security, legitimacy. So in war, nobody win. But in peace, everybody winner. That is why, I quote him, I shifted my life from academician, the president of the University of Jordan, to be the leader or to lead the peaceful agreement with late Rabin, which also he gave his life for the peace. God bless his soul. As much as God, I hope he will bless the soul of King Hussein, the peace builder in Middle East. Dr. Majali always, as he appointed in his paper, that we can't expect the God sent to us the peace situation from sky. We have to work that. We have to work for that. Everybody should be non-killing, peaceful messenger in this world. And always he used to add and to tell us, and he mentioned that I think in his paper, that this global, what's happening in the United States or in India or China or Philippines, it affects the Middle East. So this global, it's a village, one family, but small family, he said. That we should keep and develop the ties between these families, ties of peaceful ties, brotherhood ties. And we should work always for the benefit of the peace, non-killing, tolerance, far away from non-violence. I remember always he said, I quote him, look to Mahatma Gandhi. He led India to the victory without any drop of blood because of his way of life. Always justice will defeat the unjust. The right will defeat the wrong. So, in the end, on behalf of Majali, and I can say that because he's my president, the University of Jordan, and he's my father-in-law, he's the uncle of my wife, I greet you on behalf of him, and he sent his greetings to all of you through his best friend, Professor Paige, and he wish you all the success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Faisal.